I think one of the most interesting questions that an investor will rarely ask is about the community that sits behind Outsmarted. Understandably, investors will focus on the metrics behind the business, how many units we've sold, what new titles we might be releasing, the retention rate on our subscription offering.
But very few people ask who are the people that are actually playing Outsmarted and why are they so passionate about it? What content packs is it that they like to play? Not just about their demographics, but the culture that sit behind that community. What they're really buying from us isn't a game. They're buying a good time, they're buying connection. They're buying the opportunity to come off of social media and actually engage with each other, sit around a table, have a good laugh, and create memories, and have a little bit of internal family friendship competition. So we compete with all the different ways that people choose to spend their time and their disposable income, whether that's on a Netflix subscription or whether that's on an afternoon or evening out. And that's how we really see ourselves evolving, not just being somebody that's released a single board game, but several titles with a community where we're all about home entertainment and spending time together. I think, certainly when you have 7+ million people that have interacted with your product, you can learn a lot more from the culture of those people than you can from a spreadsheet. It was actually my brother Stuart who had the idea for Outsmarted long before it actually was materialized in 2020. Many of us will remember being a child and sitting around a table playing Trivial Pursuit with adults where the questions were not tailored at all towards younger folks. But as a child, you want to come across as being intelligent to the adults in the room, but you don't really stand a chance because it's all about, testing memory recall. So that was the original insight, how a game like that could have sold 100 million copies worldwide over a number of decades and not taken the opportunity to modernize itself to a point where kids and teenagers really want to play it. And in order to do that, you need to have a level playing field between an 8-year-old and a 50-year-old. And for years it just remained an idea until COVID came along, and then at that point the idea was born. Obviously when COVID came, in any business venture there is an element of luck and timing, and it was that moment really where the stars aligned, where people were unable to sit with family and friends in the same space. And of course Outsmarted was all about remote play, being able to play this game with people, friends and family who are not physically in the same space as you. It also intersected with a point in history where smartphones and tablets and all these types of devices are ubiquitous throughout houses. So the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I'd say the thing that surprised me the most is just how much people care about Outsmarted and how much they value being part of the community. It makes me think about how fortunate we are as business owners. Most companies have to work hard to convince themselves that they're making the world a slightly better place than where they found it. But in our case, it's actually aligned with our incentives for growth. I mean, if we don't do that, we are unable to scale. So, I find it's a real privilege as a founder of this business to be able to produce something which has a net good on households and society in general. I mean, early on there was a lot of skepticism that this was a flash in the pan COVID game, that it would disappear once the world returned to normal. And of course that proved not to be true. And we went into 2021 with less than 30,000 game owners, and now we're at 7.5 million different people who have played our game. And that's very humbling. Crises accelerate innovation. They force people to try new things that they ordinarily wouldn't have considered. And some of those things are just simply meant to stay. So one of my biggest lessons has been, don't let a crisis go to waste. When circumstances change dramatically, pay attention to what people genuinely value in that moment, because the chances are some of these things that are introduced during the crisis will remain valuable long after the crisis has passed. So the most expensive mistakes are rarely the things that you do. They are typically the things that you don't do or an opportunity that you've missed. And for us, I think one of our biggest mistakes was waiting too long before we went beyond Outsmarted and created our second and third title. So the lesson there isn't really that expert advice was wrong. It's quite the opposite. I mean, the lesson really is that every piece of advice comes with a cost. there's a cost to moving too quickly sometimes, because then you're more likely to subject yourself to making mistakes. And then, of course, there's a cost of moving too slowly. And, that cost is much harder to measure because obviously those opportunities never materialized, they never happened. So that experience made us a lot more conscious of the opportunity cost of not doing something. That's why this moment in time is so critical to QPlay, not just moving from 1 to 2 titles, but moving from 1 to 3 in the space of a year. So Stuart and I are brothers. There's no hierarchy, there's no politics, and there's very little filtering. And if one of us thinks that something's a bad idea, the other will hear about it pretty much immediately. But Disney, Hasbro, the company behind Monopoly and Scrabble, Rockstar Games, who you'll know for Grand Theft Auto, they were all founded by brothers. So when it works, it really works. I don't think I would call this a superpower necessarily, but I take pride in being authentic about who I am. And I suppose my core skill set has always been business development. The non-obvious part is, it's not about being the loudest person in the room or delivering an immaculate pitch. It's about, the curiosity, listening carefully, adapting the message to the person in front of you or the people in front of you, and just maintaining that genuine excitement about the product after you've explained it for the 1,000th time. Of course, building a great product that people enjoy is essential, but getting people to understand it and to get a concept across as quickly as possible, getting people to care about it and wanting to be part of it, that is really a superpower for a founder. And I'd say I've come to realize that's probably one of my strengths. I should probably start by saying that we only hire expensive people, and it's not because we're generous, it's because we're frugal. I mean, I've learned that the most expensive hires that you will make are the ones that look the most inexpensive on paper, whereas the people who truly create the most value have options. And in today's world, with AI increasing the speed and quality of what we can output, one exceptional person can outperform several average ones. So if money were no object, I'd be hiring aspiring founders who are just about to start their own companies. I mean, those are the hardest people to recruit because you're competing with their ambition. But there's something special about people that want to start their own businesses and be founders. They see opportunities where other people see problems. They have a bias towards action, and they don't wait to be told what needs fixing. They just do it. Well, 5 years ago, I would have told you that building a company that generates tens of millions in revenue wouldn't be possible unless you had at least 100 people in your organization. I made the assumption that scale required a scale in headcount. More customers meant more employees meant more management meant more complexity. But I genuinely no longer believe that's the case. Artificial intelligence has fundamentally rewritten the rules of how companies can be built and how they can scale. We're already seeing businesses reach hundreds of millions in annual recurring revenue with small teams of tens of people, not hundreds of people. There's a temptation to use AI simply because it's fashionable at the moment, to maximize tokens rather than maximizing outcomes. But the companies that will win are the ones that use it thoughtfully to remove friction, increase the leverage that they have from small teams and to do extraordinary things. Tyrion Lannister, probably, from Game of Thrones. Not because of his killer one-liners, although they're TV gold, but because, at his very core, he's a pragmatist. He's never the strongest person in the room. He's rarely the one with the most resources or the one with the most authority, but he succeeds because he understands people. He really thinks strategically, and he stays calm when others become emotional. So in my personal life, if you remember the movie Vacation or the series of films, Christmas Vacation, European Vacation, you'll remember Chevy Chase as the father, Clark W. Griswold. He just puts the most insane level of effort to be the world's best dad. But of course, he's terrible at it. But really, that's all that matters, is that he's so focused on being a fantastic father and family man. And I'd say that any father out there should aspire to be like Clark W. Griswold. I think founders that I envy most at the moment are probably those building in AI. My wife is a co-founder in the AI space who's on the verge of building a unicorn in less than 3 years. And I get a front row seat to that journey, both the highs and the lows. So one of her VCs described the process of building a business as feeling like you're being pulled by your nose hairs. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's surprisingly accurate. Building a company is often, genuinely uncomfortable. It's frustrating. It can be mentally exhausting, right up until the moment everyone tells you how lucky you are. So going back to today's founders in the artificial intelligence space, I think what makes it so fascinating is that it feels like we're living through one of those rare moments of genuine technological inflection. Historically, economies, they've been shaped by two fundamental inputs, capital and labor. And now, perhaps for the first time in history, we're seeing a third force emerge in a really meaningful way, and that, of course, is AI. So, it's not necessarily the sector that I admire the most, but the founders who are willing to navigate the uncertainty and build through these moments of profound change. So I have a 3-year-old daughter, and one of the things I'd most like to do after eventually exiting the business is just simply be more present in her life. I'd love to spend more time with her, particularly around sports and the small rituals of growing up that entrepreneurship inevitably causes you to miss. She's already in the 90th percentile height-wise, so I'm constantly wondering what sport it is she'll gravitate towards, whether that's tennis or athletics. But whatever it is, I would just like to be there for it. So regarding an exit, that decision is still a long way off. Right now, we are far more interested in what it is that QPlay can develop into. We've built something really valuable with Outsmarted, and we're still in the very early innings. The opportunity, the real opportunity is in front of us, this moment of time. That is probably what excites me more than anything else.